Hello, my name is Vivien Sharon, and I'm a real estate broker with Sotheby's International Realty Canada. And today I'm very excited to welcome you to Series 2 of Coffee with Vivien Live. Today's episode is about the home inspection checklist that every buyer should have before buying a home or a condominium. And today we have a very special guest, Alan Carson, who is one of the founding fathers of home inspections in Toronto and in Ontario. So Alan Carson lives home inspections. Since he co-founded Carson Dunlop in 1978, he has focused his professional life on the development of his profession. And for more than 43 years, Carson Dunlop has performed hundreds of thousands of home inspections and has trained thousands of home inspectors. So the question today is the importance of having a home inspection, and that's something we're going to talk about in a few moments. And I guess the question is, you buy a property, do you really know what you're getting? How will a home inspection guide you in decision-making before you buy? What surprises will you find when you move in? And after all, your home is your largest asset. So this is a very, very important topic. So if you have any questions on this subject today, please put them in the chat and we will try to address them. But before we continue, let me tell you a little bit more about this series. In season 1, we covered many topics of interest: real estate, design, technology, architecture, the environment, culture, health, wellness, and more. And I am the author of the recently published book, The Boomer's 7-Step Guide to Downsizing. And the 7-Step Guide to Downsizing, Overcoming Fear, and Discovering Freedom. And I encourage you to go to my website, viviensharon.com/book, where you will find many tips and strategies to help adult children and their parents through the emotions of downsizing, or you can order a hard copy on Amazon. So now we're going to go back to the topic today. Our guest is Alan Carson. And today we're going to talk about home inspection. So welcome, Alan. And here are the 3 topics we're going to cover before I introduce you to him. Buying a home. Why is it important to have a home inspection before buying a home? Second topic, selling a home. Tell me about selling your home, and will it sell faster with a pre-home inspection, and why? And the third topic, buying a condo. What do you need to know before you buy a condo? So now I'd like to welcome Alan.
Thank you, Vivien. Great to be here.
Great to have you, and you have your coffee and we can start our conversation.
I do, my favorite daytime drink.
Thank you. Sounds great. So let's begin. Tell us, Alan, about what is a home inspection exactly?
Well, and it's a great question, and it seems self-evident, but it's really not. So a home inspection is a physical evaluation of the present condition of a home. And our purpose is to make sure that the house is performing its intended function and that will keep the occupants warm, safe, and dry. So it's not a code compliance inspection. It's not a municipal kind of a thing at all. We're not worried about bylaws. We're worried about, does the house work? And is it going to protect the people in it and work efficiently, keep the house comfortable, and so on. So it's that point in time, what's the condition of the property? We don't fuss the cosmetics, we fuss the nuts and bolts.
Exactly. So we're going to go a little bit more in detail in a moment, but I want to ask you, how does a home inspection fit into a real estate transaction?
Well, that's a fascinating question, because there are really 2 answers. So when we work for buyers, which is what most people think about, although parenthetically, more than half of our inspections are for sellers now, but the traditional way people think about a home inspection is for a buyer. And in a typical market condition, people will make an offer to purchase a home conditional upon a home inspection. The home inspector will then come in, provide a report, and then people can move forward making an informed decision. So that's kind of the traditional way, which quite frankly has been a little disrupted with the crazy market conditions in Toronto and many other parts of the country over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
The other way that it works is as a seller's inspection or a pre-listing inspection, wherein the person selling the home will have the inspection done and make the report available to prospective purchasers. So two very different models of how home inspection fits into the real estate transaction.
Right. So how thorough, I guess the checklist, when one is doing, a home inspector is being hired on behalf of a buyer, and they put in a condition to buy the home pending the home inspection. What are some of the checklist points, just generally, because you don't go behind walls, I don't believe, you don't do mold. Infrared is a level above what might be offered, or you have to pay extra for that. So can you explain, let's talk the buyer side first. What are the general checklists that a home inspector would be doing for a house?
Okay, great. And I'm going to say that the technical component of the inspection is the same whether it's a buyer or seller's inspection. So this answer kind of applies to both sides of the story.
Yes.
And so we're going to deal with the roof. We're going to deal with the exterior of the home, the structure, the heating and cooling system, the electrical system, the plumbing system, the insulation and ventilation, and the interior of the house, again, from a functional standpoint. So it's those 9 systems of the house that make up a typical home inspection. Mm-hmm. And that checklist for a home inspector is several hundred items over a general inspection.
So how long would this home inspection take? If it's a buyer looking to buy conditional on the inspection of the house, how long does it take, and what is an average cost?
The average time varies obviously based on 2 things, the age and size of the home. And I'm going to say on average 2.5 hours for a home inspection. A larger house would be longer, of course. A condo might be a little bit less. In terms of the cost, the fees are again subject to the age and size of the house. Our home inspection fees start at about $560.
Okay, so the buyer agent would accompany the home inspector with probably the sellers are not there and they're going through the house. It takes a couple of hours, and then your home inspector produces a report. What does that involve? And is the turnaround really quick, because the decision has to be made immediately to go forward or not?
Absolutely. And let me add one comment in there before I answer the question directly, and that is we very much encourage our clients to come through the home with the inspector, because I think of it not only as a home inspection, but a 2.5-hour course in home ownership. So we show people what we're talking about, what we're looking at. We show them how to change their furnace filter, where to turn off the water and the electricity in the event of an emergency, and give them some tips on looking after the property, because it is, after all, the largest investment most people make, and it's where you're going to raise your family. So it's critically important. The report itself is produced the same day as the inspection. We are extremely proud of our reports and the format. We try to deliver a technical set of content in a layperson friendly format. So we don't have long narrative reports. We have short bullet points. We have lots of photos, lots of illustrations, because to me, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Mm-hmm. And so our reports are produced quickly. We always have them out by the end of the day of the inspection, because to your point, a real estate transaction has a rhythm to it, and we don't want to disrupt the rhythm. We want to be part of the rhythm.
Exactly. So it is very much, and I've been witness to many of these as a real estate broker with Sotheby's. I've been with the clients on the buyer side. walking through with the home inspector, with the buyers, my clients, if they're buying, and looking with them and going through the checklist. And of course, I know they ask a lot of questions because they don't know the house. And they check for many things. And I think some of the big issues, and in a moment we're going to go through them, but not quite yet. I recall the basement, and they want to make sure water and moisture and mold. And sometimes they ask for a little add-on, and I'd like you to explain the infrared. I've added that on as an extra charge. I believe I don't think it's included in the basic one, is it?
You're absolutely right. And and it's interesting that you phrased the question the way you did, because it's so apropos, because water is the biggest enemy of homes. And so a home inspection, by definition, according to all the standards across North America, is a visual inspection of the readily accessible features. So unlike Mike Holmes and his commercials, you don't get to put your fist through the wall and pull it apart and see what's in behind. So a home inspection is based on the visible evidence. The additional option of an infrared allows us to use a thermographic imaging camera, or what some people call an infrared camera, and that's typically $195 extra. The insight that it provides is that it's not X-ray vision, which is what a lot of people think. So we don't get to see through the walls. What an infrared camera does is it identifies elevated moisture levels that would not be visible. And so it can be a yellow flag to a hidden moisture problem, which may often be associated with mold. And Vivien, you were exactly right at the outset. We don't specifically inspect for mold during a home inspection, but if we see mold, we certainly report it. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Exactly. And visibly, you'll see perhaps in the basement or the bedroom near the attic or wherever, you'll see a little staining or something. So that's a red flag, or some kind of bulge or something in the drywall, but it's what's behind it that if it's not visible. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. And now we're going to show a few slides so people understand the visuals. The first one would be things to look for when buying a home. And these are telltale points that Alan is going to talk about. So let's take a look at the first slide. Can you tell us about wet basements?
Absolutely. And this one's pretty clear and pretty obvious. And this is an unfinished basement. And when you see the storage up on wooden platforms like this, it's a pretty good clue that this is an ongoing or chronic problem. And wet basements are easy to detect when they look like this, but a lot of basements are finished, and it's often much more difficult to determine whether the basement is wet. The other thing is, I want to put it in perspective by saying about 98% of homes in the GTA have moisture issues in the basement from time to time, but very few of them have moisture all the time. So when we're doing a home inspection, we might see evidence of moisture in the basement, but the question may be, is it active, or is this something that happened a few years ago and has it been rectified? So we have some other things that we look for, and we can talk about those perhaps in the next slide.
Okay, that's gutters.
There we go. And this is counterintuitive to most homeowners, but it's absolutely true. And that is that most of the wet basement problems that we find are not insidious underground streams or springs below the basement floor. It's really rainwater and melting snow that doesn't get carried away from the house properly. And it's important to understand that a basement is not like a boat. If you surround a basement with water, the water will find its way into the home through the basement walls. And so the trick here is devilishly simple, and that is keep the water away from the basement and from the foundation. And one of the easiest ways to do it is to allow your eaves troughs or your gutters to do their job. And when they're filled with leaves and they have little mini trees growing out of them, you know they're not going to be able to carry the water away. So it's something not always visible from the ground, but it's something that homeowners look at. And even in the house, on the the picture is of the house on the left, but even the little bit of the house on the right, you can see has the same issue. So is this a serious house problem? Absolutely not. It's a regular maintenance item, but the implications can be that wet basement. And people don't necessarily connect those two thoughts. Very simple solution, keep your eaves troughs clean, but a very significant problem of a wet basement if you don't.
Correct. A quick and easy fix, really, that you determine on an inspection. What's the next one?
The next one is related as well. And I come back to the wet basement issue. And there are really 2 points in this slide, although one's pretty subtle. The first one is pretty clear. First of all, you can see the pond of water sitting against the house. And as I mentioned, the foundation wall is not a boat, so that water is going to find its way into the basement. A simple thing to do is make sure the ground around the house for the first 6 feet slopes away from the house rather than toward it. So this is just after a heavy rain, the water is sitting on the ground and it's being funneled against the foundation wall instead of being drained away from it. And the water will eventually soak into the ground. But in the short term, when you push it all against the house, you have the problem. Now, the second situation that's a little more subtle in this slide, and you can't really see very clearly because of the chain link fence, but just behind that, you can see a little bit of a white downspout. And the trick on the gutters, we talked about the eaves troughs have to collect the water, but then where do they dump it? And in this house, it dumps all the water from those eaves troughs just about a foot or so from the house. So the right solution is to extend that out 6 feet away. And that's easy and inexpensive to do. You can buy a downspout extension at the Home Depot for about $20. So it's not a significant issue. So those two things solve about 95% of wet basement problems in the city. Keep the gutters and downspouts doing their job, carrying the water away at least 6 feet, and have the ground slope gently down away from the house rather than toward it. It's so simple. It doesn't sound believable, but it is so effective. And it really is that simple.
Very good. Next slide. Roofs.
So people are always terrified, but what's the roof like? And home inspectors get up on the roof and home buyers and real estate sales professionals do not. So I wanted to touch on the reality about roofs. So asphalt shingles are what most roofs are made of in our market. And shingles are designed to last about 15, maybe 20 years. And there are different qualities and levels. So you can extend that a little bit, but on average, that's the range. And what people need to understand and appreciate is that just the way people have to buy new shoes and new clothes from time to time because they wear out, a bad roof does not mean a bad house. A bad roof means the house needs a new overcoat. It's a disposable component of the house. And when you buy a house, rarely will it be brand new. Often it will be partway through the life, and sometimes it will be close to the end of its life. And that is something you want to be aware of and help you make an informed decision, because there will be an expense involved in replacing the roof. But I find buyers, especially newer buyers, overreact and get very nervous about, oh, the house has a bad roof, it's a bad house. Absolutely not. It's just part of the life cycle and the routine. So we do pay attention to these things, and we provide, one of the things that Carson Dunlop does that not all home inspectors do is we will provide ballpark costs for improvements that we recommend, including when you have to do this. So if I said to my wife, honey, we need a new roof, and she would have no idea whether that's $1,000 or $50,000. So we do give people an order of magnitude so that they can go ahead and make that informed decision. So we don't want people to ignore it, and we don't want people to overreact.
That's great that you give a ballpark price so that they have an idea.
Yeah.
That's great. And the next slide.
So this one is a little bit self-evident, but the other big thing on the checklist for home buyers is the heating and cooling system, what some people call the HVAC, which is just stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. But it's the furnace and the air conditioner that you want to pay attention to. Now, this one is almost as old as I am. Well, that's a bit of a stretch, but it's probably 50 years old. So you're not going to see many like this. And a homeowner can probably identify something that looks this unusual, but a lot of modern furnaces look very much the same. And we spend time looking at the age and capacity of the heating system and the distribution network, and the same thing on the cooling. Do we get air moving to all parts of the house? Because in a lot of homes, if someone has converted a garage to a living space, there may not be any air movement in there. There may not be any ductwork. There may not be any air conditioning in that part of the house. So we look at those sorts of things. But it's the, and we will again help people plan. If we say the furnace, again, furnaces probably last about 20 years on average, and air conditioners about 15 years in our climate. And so we will help people say, here's how old it is, here's the life expectancy. And so they can start to plan, if they need to, for updating those things. And the good news is the new equipment is so much more efficient than old that they have become, and some people are replacing them before they wear out for that reason. Although frankly, if it was my house, I wouldn't change it over until it broke. But the new systems are more compact and more efficient. So that's the good news. You're talking again about a disposable item in a house that is made to wear out every 15 or 20 years. Need to keep that in perspective as we're going through the home inspection process and as people make their buying decision.
Okay, great to know. The longevity of everything is finite.
It is.
Okay, wonderful. What's the next slide?
So this is a very controversial plumbing material. So about in the 1990s, we'd always used copper for our supply piping in houses. And then people said, well, gosh, plastic is so much easier to work with. And so a lot of piping came out that is, the short term for it is PEX, which stands for polyethylene. And so Kitec was a brand name of this that got a large high profile class action suit and lots of attention in the media. And what's fascinating is this piping was used, by the way, for hot water, and it was also used in hot water heating systems for piping. Mm-hmm. And there were indeed some problems, and the class action lawsuit came about in 2011, but we've been watching it closely in Toronto for 10 years now. And we have seen very few problems. And I think what's happened is a couple of things. The problems that cropped up were largely based on the fittings that were used. And there was a defect in the fittings that were manufactured early. Most of these were made in Asia and shipped to North America. Mm-hmm. And then every city is different in terms of its water quality. And the Greater Toronto, Ontario and Southern Ontario is blessed to have very good quality water. A lot of the problems with this piping that came up were in Nevada and so on, where the water quality was quite different. So there had been problems, and we wondered what was going to happen here. And the long story short is that we haven't seen a lot of problems. The piping was manufactured from 1995 to about 2007. But we've seen it in houses built into 2010, 2011, because of course the people that had the warehouses full of it didn't throw it out. They continued to sell it and so on. Mm-hmm. The product never had a recall, a class action lawsuit, but no recall. The company's still in business. It's a Canadian company. Several different names for it. By the way, Kitec is the generic name that everybody uses, but there are 5 or 6 different brand names of it that you have to, as a home inspector, be aware of. So our position is to point it out to clients, have them understand it, because it is a material fact and people do want to know about it. Mm-hmm. But our recommendation is to do absolutely nothing to maintain it. And I've got 5 kids, and one of my kids bought a house in the last 2 years, had some Kitec piping in it. And she said, should I not buy it? Go ahead, don't worry about it, you're fine. Mm-hmm. And there have been no issues.
So it's just to show us that this has been an issue in the past.
That's right. And there is, and unfortunately our media is so powerful that the media has done an extensive job. And of course, social media makes everything so accessible. So if you Google this product, you're going to get a litany of bad news. And so I don't want our customers to call us a year after they move in and say, why didn't you tell us about this horrible piping? So it's our responsibility to let people know, but at the same time, again, lend that perspective and say, we've seen no more problems with this than we see with copper piping. And in our opinion, and we have a little one pager that we attach to reports that tell people if something happens, here's what to look for and where. But it is so rare that we have not worried a great deal about it. So occasional issues, but occasional issues on every piping system.
So we'll quickly go through the remaining slides. Let's see the next one. And then we're going to knob and tube. I guess you'll briefly talk about this one.
Yeah, this is an older wiring system used up until 1950. It's not used anymore. People are terrified of it. The wiring was terrific quality, but it does get abused a little bit by homeowners and home handymen over time. So most people want to replace it over time, and usually best done during a renovation.
Perfect. The next one.
And this is aluminum wiring. This one does not need to be replaced. Highly controversial, again, used from the 60s and 70s. But again, in a home inspection report, we'll tell people to do a couple of small safety things and not worry about it.
Okay. Next one.
Vermiculite insulation in the attic. Vermiculite was used extensively through the 20th century. A lot of it, about 80% of it, contains asbestos. And so there is the conventional wisdom that it should be replaced with more modern traditional insulation, and that's fine. We will point it out during inspections. It's typically a few $1,000s to remove. Again, is it a reason not to buy a house or to pull back? Absolutely not. It's a consideration, but not a huge issue.
Great. Next slide.
And this is the last one, also up in the attic, again, where the home inspectors go and where the buyers don't. Mold on the underside of the house. I'm going to say about $3,500 to $5,000 to get rid of it. I'll also say very quickly that we didn't used to fuss it back in the day. Mold has become a big issue, largely driven by the media. So does mold in the attic really present a health issue for homeowners? I'm not a health scientist, but I'm not terribly worried about it. But we do recommend removal because that's the conventional wisdom these days.
Okay, well, those are really, really important points when buying or considering to buy a home. And we're going to jump for a moment as we're slowly coming toward the end about condos. We have some slides to move forward with condos, a few of them. Could you just tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so what is different about condos from homes is very often from the clothes dryer to the outdoors is a long way, and there'll be ductwork involved. And most condos have a clean out door that most condo owners don't know about. And you can see this is all the lint that is built up in the duct. So the dryer doesn't dry very well and actually poses a fire hazard. So one of those, it's an example of those little differences between condos and houses that most people are not aware of.
Next slide.
This is a close-up of a heating system in a condo, and I just wanted to touch on this because this one's obviously in distress. When people buy condos, they think they're buying a home with no maintenance. That's why people buy condos. The reality is everything needs maintenance. In condos, it's often not clear who's responsible for maintaining the heating system. More importantly, it's often not clear to condo owners who owns the heating system and the cooling system and who's responsible for replacing it when it fails. A lot of condo owners are shocked when they find they've got a $5,000 to $10,000 bill to update the heating and air conditioning in their condo, which they've paid no attention to, and they assume it's part of the common elements. It's often not. Correct.
Good to know. Next one.
The last one is just a quick example of the difference between condos. If you look really closely inside this cabinet, you'll see a cutout on the right side. And strange to believe, that's where the electrical panel is. That violates lots of common sense rules as well as some codes. So condos have limited space and people do creative things, including hiding the electrical panels, which can be a bit of a safety issue. So that's probably enough on that one.
So let's talk a moment or two about condos. We'll go back to condos in general. People have to understand that when they buy a condo, they're responsible for the interior, everything within the interior walls of the condo. They're not responsible to maintain the balconies in most cases, or the corridors outside the door, the front door of the unit. But within the unit itself, it is their own home. They've paid for it and they have to maintain it. And many people, when buying, don't think of having a home inspection for X number of dollars prior to buying to make it a condition to have a condo home inspection, because they feel it's so much less complicated than a house. What can go wrong? So in a nutshell, what do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what, if I were buying a condo, I would have it inspected. We have seen so many issues that we talked about the heating and cooling system can be a very significant expense. We can talk about unsafe electrical systems. We can talk about older plumbing systems. And by the way, there's a whole issue around where to turn off the water in a condo. The other problem with condos is you very often have several homes above you, other condos above. Do they ever have leaks? Do their dishwashers ever fail? Do their washing machines ever overflow? Does that water come down into your unit? And does it get hidden in behind walls and cause mold and issues? Even though you're not responsible for the balcony, there's that sliding door, and does it leak, and does it allow water in and cause mold? So there are a lot of things. And if I go back to the high-tech piping, there is a huge issue with condos where condo boards and condo managers are requiring condo unit owners to pay for replacing the pipe. It doesn't matter whether there's a problem or not. They are asking them to replace all of the high-tech piping in their unit, and the cost can be anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000. If you're buying a condo, you need to know that before you go in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's really important that you've told us all these very important things from the buyer side. Before we wrap up, a question or two about the pre-listing. This is the seller side. So the seller wants to sell their home, and in order to sell it a little more quickly and to have some paperwork ahead of time for the buyer and the buyer's agent to have, the seller pays for a pre-list home inspection. Not usually a condo inspection, but pre-list home inspection. Could you just simplify to tell us what is that about?
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, I think that's how real estate should be sold, right across the board. And it would certainly take a lot of the issues off the table about transparency and the questions about homeowners' bill of rights or home buyers' bill of rights and so on. So to me, the advantages of it are, you touched on that the home will sell more quickly. And I think homes are selling pretty quickly in this market, especially with a hot market and limited supply. But I also know a lot of buyers will not come to the table, including some of my children buying homes, if they can't get a home inspection. So if the seller has one, I think it attracts more buyers who are willing to make a serious, significant offer because they have a sense of what they're getting into. And then lastly, the advantage to me of a seller's inspection to both the seller and the real estate professional is that transfer of liability. When buyers are buying something they don't know anything about, don't in their mind have an opportunity to get a home inspection, then I think they are very often unhappy when they find a problem when they move into the house. And I'm seeing more and more people come back and look for some relief from that. So that pre-listing inspection helps sell the houses more quickly, attracting more buyers with serious offers, and reduces liability across the board.
But would you also recommend that the buyer's agent suggest that on top of this, that the buyer's agent have their own independent home inspection if they're able to, and it's not an offer scenario frenzy situation, which is another story altogether?
I think that's a terrific idea. And yeah, that second pair of eyes and that second opinion, I think, is absolutely valuable. We also offer at Carson Dunlop, if you have done a pre-listing inspection, we will do a walkthrough review for the buyer for half the cost of a home inspection, so that creates a contractual relationship between the buyer and the home inspection company. And again, it helps the buyer understand what it is they're getting into. And we can do that during the offer period. We can do it after the offer, because people really need to understand the home they're going to be living in. So we see the value to that. That's typically around a $260 cost. And I think it's a terrific investment. And if people would rather get their own third-party independent inspection, I love that as well. So either way works very well for me.
Right. Well, these are all very, very important tips. And I'd just like to ask you, what is the training of a home inspector?
We have a 10-course post-secondary program that typically takes people about 6 months to a year to complete. And then at Carson Dunlop, our people work for several months with existing inspectors. So starting out watching, then doing part of the inspection, then doing the whole inspection and being supervised until our people are comfortable that they're qualified. We are blessed at Carson Dunlop to have about 16 inspectors, including an inspection manager and training coach, a full-time complement of customer service people in the office. A lot of home inspectors are one-man shows, two-person operations, and it's tougher for them to go through that kind of process and have that kind of infrastructure. So we're very lucky that way.
Do your inspectors work all over Ontario or just the Toronto GTA area?
Yeah, we go up to the southern end of Lake Simcoe, kind of out to Oshawa, a little bit beyond, and down around the corner to Hamilton and a little bit beyond. But yeah, generally we're kind of Golden Horseshoe.
Okay, wonderful. So I have one last surprise question, which I'd like to ask you. And the question is, are buyers more sophisticated and demanding today? Do they expect more from a home or condo inspection?
Buyers are no doubt more sophisticated and more demanding than they ever have been. Yeah, and I mean, the internet has been a part of that. I find young people are doing so much more research on their own than my generation ever did around buying a house. And when you look back on it, it was kind of ridiculous that we would typically spend, and I'm talking about my generation and my family, we would spend more time agonizing over buying a used car than buying a resale home. And, you know, we take the car to the mechanic, we take it a test drive. When people are buying houses now, having spent less than 45 minutes in the home. So it's a very different world, but we are finding our feet are held to the fire more so than ever before. They're sophisticated, they're demanding. Social media is extremely powerful. So yeah, it's a different world.
It's a different world. I totally agree with you. It's funny you should say that people buy a car and make it equivalent somewhat to buying a house on one viewing. Maybe two, but even one viewing people have bought, which is quite amazing. So we're pretty well at the end of the show right now. It's been really interesting and so educational, I think, for me and for everybody to learn more about this important topic. So, Alan, how can people find you and learn more about your company?
Well, we have a very complicated website. It's called carsondunlop.com. And we do have a terrific customer service team. And we also have online booking 24/7. And it's not one of those irritating things where you fill out a form and wait for us to get back to you. It's live, it's on our schedule. So people can book if it's Saturday night, midnight, and you've got to get a home inspection scheduled, we can do that. We have a big red book inspection button on our website, and you can get right to it. So yeah, the website's easy. Our phone number is on the website. I won't ask people to try to remember a phone number, but we're pretty accessible. And Carson Dunlop is a pretty simple name, pretty simple search.
That's great. Well, I really thank you. This was most interesting. And thank you for participating and joining us today. Alan, we really appreciate your time.
Oh, I had a great time. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
It was great. So that ends our episode for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. In the next episode of Coffee with Vivien Live, it will be in 2 weeks on Wednesday, September the 29th. At 12 noon, and we will feature the award-winning entrepreneur and community leader, Jody Steinhauer, who will discuss the topic, why does giving back to the community make good business sense? So that's it for today. You can follow this series on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on my website, viviensharon.com. So please like the video, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed it, we will see you next time. Bye for now.